It is a big-time bantamweight clash coming up this weekend. If you like Kakhramonov versus Nurmagomedov, or if you like Tim Elliott versus Tagir Ulanbekov at bantamweight this weekend, you're gonna love the determined Dan Argueta taking on the Heat, Ronnie Lawrence. A couple of weak nicknames, but a couple of fiery bantamweights. And I really like this fight. Like, going back and watching the tape got me excited for it. So hopefully I can convey that to you, because for Dan Argueta, the fans have known him for a bit of a time now. He's trained at Jackson Wink for a very long time. He was kind of a Cub Swanson protege at the same time.
Interpreter as well.
And if you look at it for Argueta on The Ultimate Fighter, he was on season 29 and he faced Ricky Tercios. Was he selected first overall by Brian Ortega on that season? Yes, he was. And if you go back and watch that Dan Argueta fight against Ricky Tercios, and I plead you to watch it, it's one of the best fights you're going to find on The Ultimate Fighter. And I know Stephan Bonner and Forrest Griffin get that crown, but Dan Argueta, Ricky Tercios in the opening round of the tournament was an absolutely wild fight, because if Argueta gets the first round and the second round's really close, well, those early fights, they're only 2 rounds. And then it goes to a sudden death one. And Ricky Tercios ends up holding the position and getting the win in that third round. But Argueta, I mean, he is one of those guys, resilient as ever. He goes back to the regional scene, gets 3 big wins with the LFA, becomes the bantamweight champ over there. And then on incredibly short notice, fights Damon Jackson up a weight class.
Wild.
Gets taken down and held down, but he gets backpacked.
Made a good count of himself.
He whack-a-moled poor Damon, and Damon was swelled right up. So the Control got a win over that backwards volume type of action. Argueta, his last time out against Nick Aguirre, picking up a big-time win, and where Aguirre had some early opportunities, kind of, round 2, round 3, Argueta steamrolled over 10 minutes of control time in that fight. And Dan Argueta is one of those guys that already he is just 1-2 at the UFC's apex, because a loss to Tercios, a loss to Jackson, and then a win over Aguirre. It'll be interesting to see how Argueta makes out against a guy cut from the same cloth in Ronnie Lawrence, who struggled against Kakhramonov, who's one heck of a wrestler, a 2019 4th-place Sambo champion. But if you look at it for Lawrence overall, this guy is so takedown heavy. No, stranger to taking the fight down to the mat, and if his opponent pops back up, he's going to rinse and repeat with the takedown. You saw that in the Jose Johnson fight on Contender Series.
And that was wild, because it was insane to see Lawrence get out-grappled to that level by Kakhramonov his last time out. But Lawrence is one of those fighters, when he can implement his own offensive takedown, he's just so, not even active, I should say. He's like a dog on a bone. He's not going to give up on it, and he will shoot for a very high volume of takedowns. And that's what's going to be the interesting thing about this fight. I think there's one version where we get a lot of clinch control and a lot of kind of stuck takedowns. I really do, because both guys are of maybe not equal value with their wrestling, but both guys, like you said, are cut from that same cloth. When they are offensive wrestling, they're going to have a lot of success. When they're defensive wrestling, or when they're defensive grappling, I should say, they can be held in certain positions. But for Argueta, I feel like he gained a ton of stock in his loss against Damon Jackson. I don't think a lot of people left that fight thinking, oh, Argueta's not going to have some kind of UFC career, because...
Yeah, and that's the other thing, too. With Argueta, you're going to think, okay, he loses to Jackson at featherweight, so he must be a featherweight because it's on your screen. Nick Aguirre came in as a short notice replacement, so that's why Argueta's last fight was also at featherweight. Not necessarily worried about the weight cut for Argueta to 135 in this one.
No, but he is a good size for this division. And again, all this fight comes down to is who can offensively wrestle to the highest level. I think the activity, again, I side a bit with Lawrence, and I do think that if he is able to get takedowns, he's going to wear on Argueta a little bit. And I do think that volume is going to help him in the matchup. But if Argueta can just be really heavy on top and hold Ronnie Lawrence in some of those positions, I know Kakhramonov wasn't able to completely hold Ronnie Lawrence down. Like, he's a squirmy guy off of his back. So that's why I think Ronnie Lawrence is the slight favorite in the matchup. I just think his activity and his ability to keep on working no matter where the position is why a lot of people are siding with him.
And Ronnie Lawrence, you saw, again, the resolve when he fought Mana Martinez. He gets rocked and wobbled, and then he's rocking and wobbling Mana himself. And if you look at it for Lawrence, he's beaten one of the Dan Argueta types, and there are types. I mean, the name, by size, by stature. He beat Garrett Armfield over with the LFA, and if I could carbon copy fighters and clone them, they're very similar in both respects. But if you look at it for Ronnie Lawrence, one thing that he has going against him record-wise is the fact that he beats Jose Johnson on Contender Series, 12 takedowns in that one. He beats Vince Cachero, 8 takedowns in that fight. Then his next time out, he goes on to take on Mana Martinez, 6 takedowns in that one. Then he fights Said Yakub Kakhramonov and gets taken down many times. Lawrence, in his takedowns, 26 of 33 attempts by the numbers under the Endeavor banner. You can't really say Zuffa anymore. But for Lawrence, of those guys, the wins and the loss to Rachmanov, none of them in the UFC anymore. None of them. Jose Johnson was supposed to make his debut last year. He made a video on it. And then he missed the weight and they decided, nah, we're done with you. So when you look at a matchup like this for Argueta, he can struggle at distance trying to defend strikes. I mean, one of the things for him is he'll wing a lot of power shots to close the gap, and then he likes to really stay heavy on his opponents. He's the type of guy that if Lawrence gets up, he's going to try and snap down a lot. He's going to try and wear and physically impose against guys. And we saw it out of Argueta where he might have slowed down a little bit against Tercios. You look at his fight for the LFA championship against Silva, he loses the first round, loses the second round, and wins as that fight goes on. So again, Argueta's one of those guys with that 5-round experience. Ronnie Lawrence has been with a lot of big promotions in the past. Some Bellator experience to his name as well against a really good level of competition there. But if you look at a fight like this, Lawrence is one of those guys, pepper on the outside, switching stances as he will. You look at the odds in the matchup, Lawrence is the slight favorite here. We have a look at the fan vote on Tapology to try and get a gauge of what the fans are thinking. I'm going to say over, under. I think 70% of the fans over, under going with Ronnie Lawrence.
I'll say over.
I'm going to say over. It is over, so 587 total votes, 75% Lawrence, 91% by decision. For the 25% that have Argueta, 79% by decision. And for Argueta, again, on really short notice, he fights Nick Aguirre, who was a very accredited jiu-jitsu player in that fight. He nullified that game. But when it comes to these two squirmy worms, I'm eager to see who's able to win out with their own wrestling, because Argueta, famously two-time state qualifier in Illinois high school, he went on to wrestle and team captain when he was at the University of Wisconsin Parkside, and Ronnie Lawrence too, with a very, very good wrestling background.
I do favor Ronnie Lawrence ever so slightly. I think Daniel Argueta can get set positions and have success in some of those spots, but I favor the output of Ronnie Lawrence, be that with his striking and with his offensive takedown output and his ability to get back up to his feet too. I think if Argueta does get a takedown early on in the round, it's not just a death sentence for Ronnie Lawrence. I don't think he's going to hold that position for 4.5, 5 minutes. So again, I favor the activity of Ronnie Lawrence, but I think this could be a really fun fight.
I saw Argueta freeze in some striking exchanges against other guys. Once it starts to get rolling downhill, I mean, first round against Tercios, it was Southpaw versus Southpaw. Second round, Ricky's standing there, gets hit and goes, yeah. And that made me excited. I love that fight. Like, it's one of my favorites. But for the weight cutting issue, Ronnie Lawrence was forced out of a matchup in the UFC due to weight cutting complications. He kind of cramped up, so they said, when he's supposed to fight Trevin Jones. So unfortunate there. Eager to see both these guys weigh in successfully on Friday so we can make the video for Question Mark Kicks on Saturday. I do ever so slightly have Ronnie Lawrence in the matchup because I think he can pepper enough on the outside, and he's very quick and sturdy in those scrambles. But Argueta, if he's going to get it done, he is that wrestler at 135 pounds. So a big-time matchup at bantamweight this weekend. Both of us with the heat. A great Sandra Bullock movie. Let us know down below who
great
you
Al
have
Pacino movie
in the matchup. Some big-time fights on this card, including Vettori versus Cannonier in the main event. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.